In the early days of December 1943, within the confines of Cairo, Egypt, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt paused with his pen suspended above the page, ready to inscribe a message that would alter the trajectory of wartime strategy. His advisor, Harry Hopkins, had recently concluded a vital discussion with General George C. Marshall, whom all expected to helm the largest offensive operation in history. Yet Roosevelt remained tormented by one persistent idea that had plagued his rest for weeks. "I cannot sleep at night with him out of Washington." The pivotal choice loomed, one that would bench America's fiercest battlefield commander while elevating a skilled organizer, untested in direct combat, to direct the assault on Europe. Unbeknownst to them, this selection would redefine leadership dynamics and reshape notions of exceptional generalship. The equation of top-tier command was unfolding not through triumphs on the front lines, but via unparalleled administrative skill that would ultimately outweigh any individual's strategic acumen. This juncture had been simmering since the conclusion of the Tunisian campaign in May 1943, when roughly 267,000 Axis troops capitulated in North Africa. Standing out among the U.S. leaders who shone in that success was Lieutenant General George Smith Patton, Jr., whose reputation already instilled dread in German ranks. At age 57, Patton personified the quintessential American fighting leader in the public eye. He donned bespoke attire featuring gleaming brass accents that caught the sunlight in the arid landscape. Paired pearl-handled pistols dangled at his sides, serving as practical tools he wielded with lethal accuracy rather than mere ornamentation. His speech could shock even hardened sailors, his demeanor could intimidate underlings, and his battlefield ingenuity could dismantle foe formations at a pace that challenged established doctrines. Patton's journey to this critical point stretched back many years. He entered the world on November 11, 1885, in San Gabriel, California, to a lineage steeped in martial tradition where tales of forebears' exploits in the Revolutionary War and Civil War filled his youth. His grandfather, a Confederate colonel, had fallen at the Third Battle of Winchester. Such a legacy molded Patton's character from an early age. He grappled with dyslexia, an undiagnosed affliction then, that hindered scholarly pursuits. Still, he overcame it through unyielding resolve and relentless drive. He spent 1 year at the Virginia Military Institute before joining West Point in 1904. Classroom challenges compelled him to redo his initial year, yet he earned his diploma on June 11, 1909, placing 46th among 103 graduates. From the start, his bold drive and intense rivalry set him apart from fellow cadets. Post-graduation, Patton's professional path veered into the unconventional when he took part in the 1912 Stockholm Olympics, representing the U.S. in the modern pentathlon. He placed 5th amid debate over his pistol marksmanship, which observers felt deserved better. This brush with global rivalry bolstered his commitment to peak performance and his view that the nation required fighters capable of rivaling any adversary worldwide. His physical talents, paired with influential ties from his union to Beatrice Aya, offspring of a prosperous Massachusetts magnate, provided advantages that propelled his advancement. Patton's initial taste of battle arrived in 1916 amid the punitive expedition into Mexico, acting as an aide to Brigadier General John J. Pershing. The ambitious lieutenant orchestrated a vehicular assault on Pancho Villa's band, slaying 3 of Villa's fighters, 1 a key officer. With his signature pearl-handled sidearms, Patton fired on 2 foes himself, then bound their remains to his car's fronts and returned to base. This stark theatrical deed garnered widespread notice, as press hailed him as the pioneer U.S. officer employing autos in warfare. Of greater weight, it forged a lasting bond with Pershing, his guide and advocate for years to come. As the United States joined World War I in 1917, Patton sailed with Pershing to France, where he discovered his passion: mechanized combat. Tanks, though rudimentary and temperamental, captivated him instantly for their promise. He founded the American Tank Training Center at Langres, France, crafting its curriculum and guidelines single-handedly. Drawing from French armored strategies, consulting with British tank officers, he forged U.S. approaches centered on velocity and bold maneuvers. Come September 1918, Patton directed the nascent tank brigade into action during the Meuse-Argonne push. Machine gun wounds struck him as he advanced on foot beside his vehicles, a harm that secured him the Distinguished Service Cross and solidified his image as a fearless leader in the heat of battle. Following the conflict, Patton B. emerged as a prominent proponent within the U.S. Army for the adoption of mechanized combat strategies. During the 1920s and 1930s, Patton produced numerous publications, carried out trials, and persistently advocated for the idea that upcoming conflicts would be decided by swift armored units in motion. He worked closely with Major Dwight Eisenhower, encountered in 1919 during efforts to advance tank technology and principles. Although their temperaments differed, both shared a bold concept of mechanized operations that higher-ups in the Army deemed overly costly and innovative. Fiscal limitations and traditional mindsets confined tanks mainly to supporting infantry, yet Patton continually pressed for reform. He created the M1913 cavalry saber, famously called the Patton saber, and authored detailed pieces on cavalry maneuvers, constantly exploring means to sustain attacking momentum amid evolving battlefield realities. By 1940, with Europe consumed by conflict, Patton's opportunity materialized. Elevated to brigadier general in October 1940, he assumed leadership of an armored brigade and started drilling soldiers in the bold approaches he had refined over 20 years. He founded the Desert Training Facility in California's Mojave Desert, developing an expansive site where U.S. troops practiced warfare in environments akin to North Africa. His drills were demanding, his expectations extraordinarily demanding, yet those who endured his program formed among the Army's finest fighting elements. As Operation Torch commenced in November 1942, Patton led the Western Task Force, deploying 35,000 troops onto Moroccan shores in America's initial large-scale assault against Axis powers. The Moroccan assault highlighted Patton's prowess. Overcoming opposition from Vichy French units, turbulent waters, and logistical hurdles, his command secured landing zones and advanced into the interior. Casablanca was taken in just 3 days. The Sultan of Morocco, struck by Patton's commanding presence and achievements, awarded him the Order of Wizam Alawite, accompanied by a French inscription stating, "The lions in their dens tremble at his approach." Far more significantly, Patton illustrated that U.S. troops were capable of conducting intricate amphibious assaults and overcoming resolute foes. This triumph led to his elevation to lieutenant general and expanded duties in the North African theater. Following the U.S. military's initial significant setback at Kasserine Pass in February 1943, Patton was summoned to reinstate discipline and spirits. The clash proved catastrophic. German troops led by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had breached American defenses, causing more than 6,000 losses and wreaking havoc on or seizing considerable material. Major General Lloyd Fredendall, head of II Corps, had shown himself unfit for the role. On March 6, 1943, Patton stepped in as his replacement and swiftly set about reshaping the disheartened Corps. He enforced stringent dress codes, requiring all personnel to don helmets and full attire constantly, regardless of their rearward positions. He introduced demanding routines and thorough reviews. Patton roamed ceaselessly among his formations, conversing with troops, inspecting gear, and assessing defenses. He insisted on proactive reconnaissance and forward initiatives even during defensive phases. Almost immediately, improvements became evident. Troops adopted sharper postures, reacted with greater precision, and battled with renewed vigor. Patton enlisted Major General Omar Bradley as his second-in-command, valuing Bradley's reliable expertise as an ideal balance to his own dynamic intensity. Working in tandem, they restored II Corps to peak operational readiness. In their subsequent confrontation with German forces at El Guitar in late March 1943, the Americans maintained their lines and launched effective ripostes. Patton had shown that U.S. personnel could rival seasoned German fighters when given proper preparation, order, and guidance. This achievement confirmed his techniques and positioned him as one of the nation's top wartime leaders. The Sicily operation in July 1943 boosted Patton's standing even as it sparked the controversy that would reshape his path. Under Operation Husky, The assault on Sicily placed Patton in charge of the 7th Army, with 90,000 soldiers hitting the island's southern coasts on July 10, 1943. Officially, his role involved safeguarding the left side of British General Bernard Montgomery's 8th Army as it advanced northward to Messina. However, Patton refused to remain in a supporting capacity to the British. As Montgomery's units stalled amid fierce combat near Catania, Patton identified his chance. He initiated a swift drive westward through Sicily, seizing Palermo on July 22 in a bold surge that astonished allies and enemies. Subsequently, he redirected his forces eastward, surging along the northern shoreline toward Messina in a head-to-head rivalry with Montgomery. The contest turned intensely competitive, with each commander urging his units to the limit to claim the vital harbor. Patton prevailed, entering Messina on August 17, 1943, edging out Montgomery by mere hours. The outcome, though, raised tactical doubts, as critics contended Patton had che. Rather than seeking fleeting fame by encircling German troops, the operation solidified Patton's image as a daring and forceful leader capable of accomplishing feats deemed unattainable by others. The conquest of Sicily occurred in just 38 days, resulting in about 24,950 Allied losses. This effort compelled Italy to exit the conflict and cleared the Mediterranean route for Allied vessels. Yet, within this success emerged events that would eclipse Patton's battlefield triumphs and dramatically shift his professional path. On August 3, 1943, Patton toured the 15th Evacuation Hospital close to Nicosia. As he moved among the patients, he came upon Private Charles H. Cool, a 26-year-old from Indiana admitted for battle fatigue, also known as combat exhaustion, according to the physicians. No obvious injuries marked the soldier. Convinced that such states amounted to cowardice, Patton pressed for details on the man's condition. Upon learning that the soldier felt anxious and couldn't endure the artillery fire, Patton lost his composure. He struck Cool across the cheek with his gloves, labeled him a coward, and insisted he return to the lines at once. The medical staff was stunned, yet the matter circulated via healthcare protocols and stayed under wraps for the time being. A week afterward, on August 10th, Patton inspected the 93rd Evacuation Hospital. There, he met Private Paul G. Bennett, a 21-year-old diagnosed with battle fatigue. Bennett had performed reliably in battle over 4 years, but finally hit his limit. When Patton inquired about the issue and Bennett admitted he probably couldn't handle it anymore, the general's fury surpassed his previous reaction. He struck Bennett on the face twice, the second blow so forceful it dislodged the soldier's helmet liner. Patton then pulled out one of his ivory-gripped pistols, brandished it near Bennett's head, and warned he would fire on him immediately for cowardice. He hurled the word "coward" at Bennett multiple times before directing the medics to send the man back to duty or face formal accusations. The attending doctors and nurses were appalled, and a number of them filed accounts describing the general's conduct. These accounts made their way to Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, who now led the 2nd Corps, and stowed them in his safe due to his allegiance to his old superior. However, independent submissions traveled through medical routes to the Surgeon General's office, ultimately arriving at General Dwight Eisenhower's desk on August 16th. Eisenhower confronted a torturous choice. Patton stood as perhaps the Allies' premier fighting general, his strategic skills and relentless drive seen as vital for upcoming campaigns. Nevertheless, he had physically attacked underlings, menaced one with death, and breached military regulations along with fundamental standards of humanity. The episodes exposed a deep-seated weakness, a failure to rein in his anger that cast doubts on his suitability for top leadership. Eisenhower opted for a balanced approach. He dispatched a blistering message to Patton on August 17th, asserting that although strict actions might occasionally be required, they did not justify cruelty, mistreatment of the ill, or displays of unrestrained rage before troops. Eisenhower instructed Patton to offer direct apologies to the 2 soldiers, the healthcare workers who observed the events, and all units under his command. Patton followed through, despite the apologies proving deeply embarrassing and degrading. He addressed each division, confessed his mistakes, and sought their forgiveness. Numerous troops admired his accountability. Some, however, grew disillusioned with him. The matter stayed confidential within official networks until November 21, 1943, when broadcaster Drew Pearson exposed the slapping episodes to the U.S. audience. Public response erupted in controversy and split opinions. Certain citizens backed Patton, contending that wartime demanded tough leaders intolerant of frailty. Others recoiled in disgust, seeing the assaults as signs of savagery and disqualification for leadership. Lawmakers in Congress called for clarifications. War Secretary Henry Stimson and Army Chief of Staff George Marshall endured heavy scrutiny to either uphold Patton or strip him of authority altogether. The uproar intensified precisely as the war's pivotal leadership assignment unfolded. That choice concerned not only Patton, but also two other remarkable commanders whose paths had diverged sharply. Dwight David Eisenhower entered the world on October 14, 1890, in Denison, Texas, to parents of limited resources. His dad labored as a mechanic in a creamery, and young Dwight matured in Abilene, Kansas, amid far simpler conditions than Patton's affluent youth. Eisenhower joined West Point not out of martial zeal, but for the tuition-free schooling. He finished on June 12, 1915, placing 61st among 164 graduates. That group, dubbed the class from which stars descended, eventually yielded 59 generals. Yet, back in 1915, Eisenhower appeared far from destined for prominence. His initial years in service were plagued by setbacks. When the United States joined World War I, Eisenhower yearned for a battlefield leadership role. Yet the military placed him in charge of instructing tank battalions at Camp Colt in Pennsylvania. He excelled in instruction and coordination, setting up a proficient tank academy that equipped thousands of soldiers for battle, though he never shipped out abroad. The conflict concluded prior to his departure, causing him to lament bypassing the pivotal moment of his era. Following the armistice, he dropped back to his regular captaincy before advancing to major, with progress feeling agonizingly sluggish. During 1919, Eisenhower joined the military's cross-country vehicle expedition, an 8-week journey spanning the nation that exposed the dismal state of U.S. highways. This outing, paired with his tank expertise, persuaded him that upcoming conflicts would demand agile, machine-driven armies supported by solid roadways. That year, he encountered Major George Patton at Fort Meade in Maryland, where they both served in armored divisions. Though their temperaments and origins differed sharply, the pair forged a bond and partnership. They devoted extensive time to debating armored strategies, testing gear, and penning essays pushing for mechanized combat approaches. Their commanders, however, clung to established theories, subjecting both to rebuke for their bold concepts. Over the 1920s and 1930s, Eisenhower's professional path unfolded via various administrative postings that highlighted his talent for management while sidelining him from frontline leadership. He studied at the Command and General Staff School in Fort Leavenworth, topping his group of 275 cadets upon completion in 1926. Such scholarly achievement drew notice from high-ranking leaders who prized administrative expertise and broad strategic insight. He acted as a scriptwriter and assistant to General John J. Pershing, aiding the veteran commander in composing his autobiography. He labored beneath Brigadier General Fox Connor in Panama, where Connor served as his guide and influenced his grasp of joint operations and armed forces legacy. Connor warned Eisenhower that a second global conflict loomed and that upon arrival, the U.S. would engage within a partnership, likely with Britain and France. In 1933, Eisenhower took on the role of assistant to General Douglas MacArthur, the Army's top officer at the time. Their association proved challenging. MacArthur came across as domineering, gifted, and utterly assured of his brilliance. Eisenhower, more humble and pragmatic, frequently handled the fallout from MacArthur's clashes with lawmakers and the Roosevelt government. As MacArthur headed to the Philippines in 1935 to fortify its defenses, Eisenhower went along as his deputy. The stretch from 1935 to 1939 in the Philippines brought career setbacks but valuable lessons. Eisenhower gained skills in negotiation, maneuvering the intricate ties among U.S. advisors, local leaders, and MacArthur's outsized self-image. He realized that armed efforts hinged on political backing, that joint campaigns necessitated give and take, and that diplomacy and restraint could yield greater results than clashes. Upon Eisenhower's return to America in 1939, hostilities had ignited in Europe. His trajectory surged forward as the service urgently sought seasoned planners to oversee growth and readiness. He stood out for his structuring prowess, logical mindset, and endurance in demanding tasks. In 1941, he took part in expansive drills in Louisiana that displayed the service's emerging armored strengths. His showing drew the interest of General George C. Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff, who was assembling a cadre of skilled personnel to steer the impending struggle. After Japan's strike on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Marshall called Eisenhower to the capital and placed him in the operations planning section. Eisenhower's initial duty involved crafting an approach for the Pacific region. He toiled relentlessly, sometimes resting at his desk, crafting straightforward, feasible outlines that won Marshall's approval. By February 1942, Marshall elevated Eisenhower to oversee the planning unit, entrusting him with overarching strategy for every front. Eisenhower championed a priority on Europe, asserting that Germany represented the paramount danger and that vanquishing Hitler should top the coalition's agenda. His sharp reasoning and knack for grasping the overall scope amid myriad specifics rendered him essential to Marshall. In June 1942, Marshall dispatched Eisenhower to London as the top officer for the European Theater of Operations. This leap in rank stunned many, given his lack of wartime troop command. Yet Marshall saw Eisenhower's exceptional aptitudes for managing Allied efforts. Eisenhower's objectives included basing U.S. units in the UK, fostering partnership harmony, and preparing for a cross-channel assault on France. He demonstrated brilliance in collaborating with the British. He built strong connections with W. Winston Churchill, earned the confidence of key British military figures, and established a unified Allied command center where U.S. and British personnel collaborated closely. His talent for diplomacy, readiness to yield on less critical issues while standing resolute on core matters, and sincere commitment to partnership among allies rendered him exceptionally successful. In November 1942, as Operation Torch commenced, Marshall selected Eisenhower for the role of Supreme Allied Commander, overlooking the general's absence of frontline combat background. The operation presented intricate political challenges, demanding harmony with French units whose allegiance remained unpredictable, all while reconciling divergent tactical goals between British and American leadership. Eisenhower navigated these diplomatic hurdles with outstanding finesse, brokering truces with French leaders, addressing the unstable dynamics surrounding Admiral François, and ensuring that Allied troops stayed concentrated on overcoming the Germans. The effort ultimately triumphed, boosting Eisenhower's standing. He had demonstrated his capacity to direct a multinational force during active engagements, despite never directly commanding soldiers in the field himself. The key figure in shaping the overall command structure was George Catlett Marshall. Born on December 31, 1880 in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, Marshall hailed from a household with ties to Confederate views. His father had operated as a merchant in Virginia prior to relocating to Pennsylvania. As a youth, George enrolled at the Virginia Military Institute, completing his studies in 1901 as the top-ranked captain in the Cadet Corps. He received his commission as a second lieutenant in the infantry and dedicated the following 15 years to diverse postings that honed his potential for senior leadership, though few acknowledged his outstanding talents at the time. Marshall's initial major chance arose during World War I when he acted as a planning officer for the 1st Infantry Division in France. He displayed remarkable expertise in strategy and supply management, especially in directing the relocation of substantial units amid intricate maneuvers. During the Battle of Cantigny in May 1918, the inaugural large-scale U.S. assault, his precise preparations played a vital role in the victory. In the Meuse-Argonne campaign, he orchestrated the transport of more than 600,000 soldiers and 2,700 artillery pieces, marking one of the grandest logistical feats in military annals. General John J. Pershing acknowledged Marshall's prowess and retained him nearby as an operations aide, entrusting him with duties well above his grade. Post-war, Marshall devoted 2 decades to assorted roles that enhanced his profile inside the military, even as he stayed obscure to the wider audience. He functioned as an aide to Pershing, instructed at the infantry school in Fort Benning, where he shaped an entire cohort of upcoming generals, and held multiple staff roles that highlighted his prowess in administration. He consistently won admiration for his honesty, sound decision-making, and knack for spotting capable subordinates. He maintained a compact black notebook to jot down details of emerging officers, a roster that would supply leaders for World War II. Figures such as Omar Bradley, Matthew Ridgway, Joseph Stilwell, and Dwight Eisenhower caught Marshall's eye long before achieving prominence. In 1939, President Franklin Roosevelt made the bold choice to elevate Marshall above numerous higher-ranking colleagues, naming him Chief of Staff of the Army. Roosevelt understood that the impending conflict demanded more than a battlefield tactician. It required a strategist capable of liaising with lawmakers, directing a massive buildup of troops, and aligning with international partners. Marshall assumed his post on September 1, 1939, coinciding precisely with Germany's assault on Poland. The moment proved auspicious. The U.S. military then consisted of roughly 174,000 personnel, placing it 17th globally, smaller even than Belgium's forces. The troops lacked proper gear, sufficient preparation, and a structure suited to contemporary warfare. Over the ensuing 6 years, Marshall revolutionized the U.S. Armed Services via a blend of legislative savvy, administrative brilliance, and unyielding resolve. He fostered ties with lawmakers, delivering candid and regular briefings on defense requirements. He secured enormous funding for growth, weaponry, and drills. He founded fresh training facilities nationwide, formed additional units, and supervised the enlistment and preparation of millions of recruits. He advanced skilled leaders swiftly, overriding traditional hierarchies when needed to assign optimal personnel to pivotal spots. He collaborated with the Navy amid persistent branch tensions. He handled interactions with demanding Allied counterparts, especially Churchill, whose approach to strategy frequently clashed with U.S. objectives. Crucially for the conflict's resolution, Marshall emerged as the foremost proponent of a cross-channel incursion into France. Starting in 1942, he advocated tirelessly for a straightforward strike against Nazi-held France as the quickest path to vanquishing Hitler. Churchill favored a flanking approach, targeting North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and the Balkans, regions he dubbed the soft underbelly. In the heart of Europe, Marshall contended that such an approach was tactically flawed, pulling vital assets away from the primary campaign and extending the conflict. He clashed with factions inside the U.S. Armed Forces, where the Navy pressed for greater allocations toward the Pacific theater. He sparred with British strategists haunted by the carnage of the First World War and wary of repeating a devastating Western Front assault. Ultimately, he won Roosevelt's pledge for a cross-channel assault in 1943, setting May 1944 as the launch point for the effort codenamed Overlord. After devising the plan, pushing it tirelessly, and gaining its endorsement, Marshall appeared the obvious pick to lead it. He stood as the nation's premier military figure. Churchill hailed him as the architect of the Allies' triumph. Stalin placed faith in him. Roosevelt depended on him without reservation. The British, though favoring their own generals, would welcome him as supreme Allied commander. Pershing, in his 80s by then, penned a letter to Roosevelt advocating for Marshall's selection. Lawmakers anticipated it. Military scholars took it for granted. Yet Marshall never lobbied for the role himself. Whenever questioned about his wishes, he steadfastly maintained that the commander-in-chief should choose what served the country best, not what suited George Marshall personally. Roosevelt confronted a torturous dilemma. Marshall merited the leadership. His broad strategic outlook had molded the Allies' overall plan. His talent for organization knew no equal. Still, Marshall's presence in the capital proved indispensable. He orchestrated the worldwide military campaign across various fronts. He navigated ties with lawmakers to sustain funding and backing. He collaborated with British leaders, the Navy, and challenging figures such as Douglas MacArthur, overseeing Pacific operations. He oversaw the massive industrial push that delivered arms and provisions. Admiral Ernest King and Admiral William Leahy, key voices on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, vehemently resisted shifting Marshall from his post, insisting no replacement could handle his critical duties. The summits in Cairo and Tehran during November and December 1943 forced the issue to a climax. Stalin insisted on learning who would helm Overlord, distrusting potential Anglo-American foot-dragging and seeking guarantees the landing would proceed. Churchill backed Marshall publicly, but quietly fretted over the loss of so capable a partnership coordinator. Roosevelt grappled intensely with the choice, divided between honoring Marshall's devotion and preserving his unmatched role in D.C. He dispatched Harry Hopkins to sound out Marshall in Cairo in early December. Marshall demurred from expressing a view, affirming only that he would back Roosevelt's call without hesitation. Roosevelt then arranged a confidential session with Marshall on December 5, 1943. As Marshall later described it, Roosevelt, following some evasion, posed the question plainly: what did Marshall wish to pursue? Marshall offered his familiar response: individual desires held no weight when national stakes loomed so large. Roosevelt, it said, responded, "I feel I could not sleep at night with you out of the country." The leader had settled it. Marshall would stay on as Army Chief of Staff, directing the international fight. Another figure would direct Overlord. On December 7, 1943, precisely 2 years after Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt notified Eisenhower of his new assignment. The note was typically concise and relaxed. "Well, Ike, you are going to command Overlord." Eisenhower was caught off guard. He had figured Marshall would get the nod and had geared up to head back to Washington to assume Marshall's spot as Chief of Staff. Instead, he now shouldered the weightiest command in warfare's annals. That very day, Marshall drafted a message to Stalin and Churchill announcing Eisenhower's posting. He enclosed a duplicate for Eisenhower, adding a short handwritten note. "Dear Eisenhower, I thought you might like to have this as a memento." It was written very hurriedly by me as the final meeting broke up yesterday, the president signing it immediately. GCM. The choice revealed its deep wisdom as its reasoning emerged. Overlord transcended mere battlefield tactics, demanding tactical brilliance. It posed the grandest logistical feat in armed conflict's record, demanding seamless integration of troops from diverse countries, each with distinct hierarchies, goals, and combat methods. The endeavor would encompass more than 3 million personnel, almost 7,000 vessels, 11,000 planes, and innumerable auxiliary components. Victory hinged on finesse in alliance diplomacy, prowess in synchronizing intricate deployments, foresight in aligning field actions with overarching aims, and skill in uniting officers from varied backgrounds into a cohesive force. Eisenhower embodied these traits precisely. His innate appeal earned him widespread admiration. British soldiers placed confidence in him. Chu Eisenhower earned admiration from Churchill even amid their periodic clashes. Remarkably, Charles de Gaulle, known for his prickly nature and wariness toward Anglo-American motives, deemed Eisenhower reliable. His approach to strategy extended beyond battlefield tactics to include geopolitical ramifications, financial considerations, civilian governance, and societal sentiments. Eisenhower grasped that contemporary conflict blended politics and arms in equal measure. His successes in North Africa and Sicily demonstrated his prowess in orchestrating intricate alliances amid active fighting. Above all, he cultivated a command approach that empowered underlings to feel appreciated while upholding unchallenged control. He welcomed feedback, owned up to errors, and evolved through ongoing study. Such traits positioned him perfectly to lead a multinational force where coordinated action outweighed sheer operational genius. When Eisenhower set up his command post in London during January 1944, he swiftly faced obstacles that affirmed Roosevelt's wisdom in selecting him. The initial hurdle concerned organizational setup. The preliminary strategy, crafted by British Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan, envisioned a strike by 3 divisions across a limited sector. Upon examining it, Eisenhower swiftly identified its shortcomings. He demanded an increase to 5 divisions spread over a wider zone, enhancing adaptability and minimizing risks from German reprisals. This adjustment necessitated additional vessels for amphibious landings, greater aerial backing, and enhanced logistics, all resources in scarce supply. Eisenhower engaged in tough discussions with Churchill, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and fleet leaders to obtain the vital assets. His persuasive diplomacy and knack for persuasive reasoning secured approval for the enlarged endeavor. The next issue centered on field leadership. British General Bernard Montgomery was slated to direct all land units in the opening phase, encompassing both UK and US troops. While this satisfied the British side, it bred friction among certain American officers who saw Montgomery as overly prudent and haughty. Eisenhower ensured the framework succeeded by sharply defining roles, granting Montgomery tactical oversight for the beachhead stage while intending to transfer command to U.S. leaders post-breakthrough. He navigated Montgomery's challenging demeanor, sidestepped disputes, and sustained the alliance's smooth operation. The most delicate dilemma involved Patton. Regardless of the slapping episodes, the ensuing uproar, and the widespread backlash, both Eisenhower and Marshall acknowledged Patton's indispensable talents for fluid combat once it ignited. The dilemma lay in his interim role until that phase dawned. Eisenhower's resolution showcased tactical ingenuity. Patton would helm Third Army, slated for activation solely after the landings triumphed and forces pushed inland. In the meantime, he would anchor the grandest ruse in warfare annals. Operation Fortitude aimed to dupe German spies regarding the assault's location and timing. The premise was straightforward: convince the Nazis that the primary thrust would hit Pas de Calais, the slimmest stretch of the English Channel and the prime spot for a trans-channel push. In reality, the Allies targeted Normandy, with its superior shorelines and space for advances. Yet the Germans had to remain fixated on Calais, even following the Normandy assault. Achieving this illusion demanded fabricating an illusory formation geared for the faint, dubbed the First United States Army Group, or FUSAG. This spectral entity lived solely in documents, fabricated signals, mock gear arrayed near Dover and England's southeast coast, and dispatches from Teutonic informants who were in fact Allied turncoats. Still, FUSAG required a figurehead whose posting felt plausible and whose fame lent authenticity to the peril. Only one candidate fit. Patton, benched by scandal, yet viewed by the Axis as the Allies' fiercest warrior, assumed FUSAG command in early 1944. The Germans bought it utterly. Their spy networks, including the Abwehr and SD, poured vast efforts into monitoring FUSAG. They snapped images of sham boats fashioned from pipes and tarps. They eavesdropped on broadcasts from roving teams mimicking 11 Phantom divisions. They got feeds from operatives secretly steered by the British via the double-cross scheme. Most persuasively, they observed Patton inspecting sites, addressing troops, and conferring with Phantom officers. All intel reinforced that Patton led a colossal host primed to assail Calais. Axis leaders swallowed the ploy because it aligned with sound logic. Calais promised the briefest waterspan, a mere 20 miles versus Normandy's 100. Calais furnished the straightest path to the Reich and the crucial Ruhr industrial heartland. In the Mediterranean theater, the deception efforts were crucial. Above all, the Germans recognized Patton as the Allies' premier tactician. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, reflecting later on opposing leaders, described Patton as America's finest. Erwin Rommel had analyzed Patton's strategies from the North African campaign. Hitler apparently dubbed him the Mad Cowboy General, blending scorn with reluctant admiration. German reasoning assumed the Allies would deploy their top battlefield expert for the primary assault, not a diversionary effort. Thus, Patton's location would signal the true landing site. The ruse featured one especially bold component. General Hans Speidel, who once led a panzer unit in North Africa until his capture in May 1943, was returning home due to illness. Prior to leaving in May 1944, British agents set up a dinner with Patton. During the meal, Patton, posing as FUSAG's head, casually referenced Calais and assault plans. Following that, Kramer toured southern England, witnessing vast military buildups. Signage suggested he was in the southeast vicinity of Dover. Actually, he was in the southwest observing genuine overlord staging, yet the ploy worked flawlessly. Upon arriving in neutral Sweden and briefing German spies, Kramer reinforced their preconceptions. Patton oversaw a massive army poised to strike at Calais. Meanwhile, as Patton served as the feint, Eisenhower endured grueling schedules to orchestrate the real operation. He shifted his command post to Telegraph Cottage near London, allowing undivided attention away from daily disruptions. He inspected each participating division firsthand, addressing troops, radiating assurance, and fostering loyalty. By June 1944, he had met with every U.S., British, and Canadian assault group, frequently devoting extended time to chatting with those executing his directives. The men appreciated his authentic kindness and evident care for their safety. They viewed him not as a remote figure, but as a commander who grasped the demands he placed on them. Eisenhower also confronted the toughest choices in leadership. He greenlit the airborne operation, regardless of forecasts predicting 70% losses among paratroopers landing beyond enemy positions. He acknowledged the dangers, but realized that failing to use airborne troops to protect the beachhead sides could doom the whole endeavor. He grappled with forecasts too, as D-Day was set for June 5th, only for fierce gales to delay it. His weather experts foresaw a short window of fair conditions on June 6th, then worsening storms. Skipping the 6th would mean waiting 2 weeks for ideal tidal and lunar alignments, or even until July. Such a holdup risked leaks and allowed the Germans to fortify further. Eisenhower decided proceed on June 6th. He later noted it as the most isolating choice he ever made. That night of June 5th, with units boarding vessels and planes revving up, Eisenhower stopped by the 101st Airborne at their base near Newbury. These jumpers were set to parachute into Normandy pre-dawn, capturing causeways and crossroads. Losses among them were anticipated to be devastating. Eisenhower mingled softly, sharing light stories about angling, inquiring on family roots. A camera froze a memorable shot. Eisenhower conversing with Lieutenant Wallace Strobel, his expression mirroring the strain every fighter endured. Back at base, Eisenhower drafted a statement taking sole accountability should the landings collapse. He kept it close, prepared to issue it. It stated, "Our landings have failed, and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based upon the best information available. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." June 6, 1944, broke with improving weather across the Channel. At 6:30 a.m., troops from America, Britain, and Canada charged onto 5 beaches spanning 50 miles of Normandy shore. The attack mobilized almost 7,000 ships, from battleships and landing vehicles to carriers and auxiliaries. More than 11,000 planes offered overhead cover. By nightfall, about 156,000 Allied personnel had come ashore in France. Losses reached around 10,000, with Omaha Beach bearing the brunt of U.S. fatalities amid intense German fire that almost repelled the assault into the waves. Yet the landings held firm. By midnight, Allies secured their footholds. The freeing of Western Europe was underway. Eisenhower's meticulous strategy and negotiation prowess yielded victory. The broader attack zone stopped German troops from massing on one spot. The parachute insertions, though costly in lives and disorganized in placement, disoriented German officers and slowed their reserves. Naval barrages supplied vital air cover, offered essential protection to beleaguered ground forces. Control of the skies kept Luftwaffe planes from targeting exposed vessels and soldiers. Above all, the ruse succeeded flawlessly. While intense combat unfolded in Normandy, Hitler held back his panzer units, certain that the main assault would strike at Pas-de-Calais. The Wehrmacht's 15th Army lingered around Pas-de-Calais, poised for Patton's supposed move. For 7 weeks following D-Day, key German troops idled near Pas-de-Calais rather than bolstering Normandy defenses. British spies, especially Juan Pujol Garcia, known by his alias Garbo, kept feeding intel through enemy channels about Fusag's buildup and justifications for the postponed Pas-de-Calais landing. Hitler swallowed these dispatches whole. He withheld tank formations that could have overwhelmed the Normandy foothold, anticipating an assault that never materialized. The Allies had anticipated the ploy might grant them a fortnight's edge. It delivered 7. Each German outfit pinned at Pas-de-Calais meant one less in Normandy, a tactical boon equivalent to scores of battlefield triumphs. Patton discovered the Normandy landings just like the public, tuning into BBC broadcasts on June 6th morning. The news crushed him. Even though he grasped his part in the feint and recognized his pivotal place in the scheme, he sensed he was sidelined from history's grandest campaign. In a letter to his wife, Beatrice, he confided, "It's sheer torment watching from the bench as all the acclaim slips away, yet I suppose there's plenty to go around." To his son George, training at West Point, he penned, "These indomitable warriors under my lead haven't entered the fray yet, but our time is near. How I long to join them today. It's a perfect, bright morning for combat, and I'm weary of mere idleness." Yet Patton's exclusion proved his supreme asset. His legendary status as the ghost leader of an imaginary force immobilized enemy reinforcements and persuaded Hitler that Normandy was merely a feint. It stood as the ultimate paradox in warfare. Patton secured his most decisive strategic win without firing a shot. His fame, masterfully leveraged by Allied spy masters and Eisenhower's overarching strategy, outshone any battlefield exploit. On August 1, 1944, following 2 months of grueling clashes in Normandy, the Third Army under Patton formally activated. The instant he'd anticipated had come. Operation Cobra, initiated July 25th, shattered enemy fortifications west of St. Lo. From that gap surged Patton's tank spearheads in a blitz of velocity and ferocity that left German leaders reeling. Patton deployed doctrines refined over years of study. His troops outpaced what foes deemed feasible, materializing in unforeseen spots and encircling adversaries before they could maneuver. The Third Army's sweep through France entered the annals of legend. Patton's columns dashed westward into Brittany, pivoted eastward to Paris, then swung northeastward to the Reich's frontier. By August 25th, U.S. forces were streaming into Paris. By late August, the Third Army had freed much of Brittany, sealed the Falaise pocket to ensnare German divisions, and seized numerous villages along with thousands of captives. Patton's mechanized juggernaut progressed so swiftly that paratroopers griped he was trampling their designated landing areas. In just 30 days, the Army traversed terrain that strategists projected would take half a year. The momentum stalled by August's close as logistics faltered utterly. Fuel demands far outstripped shipments. Eisenhower confronted a pivotal dilemma. He might funnel every drop of petrol and every crate of gear to Patton, enabling the Third Army to plunge into the heart of Germany while others paused. Alternatively, he could parcel out assets along a wide arc, permitting uniform progress by all Allied outfits, but blocking any sharp thrust. Eisenhower opted for the expansive front, deeming it more secure and conducive to enduring gains. Patton seethed, certain that ample resources would have carried him to Berlin by Yuletide. The clash between broad advance and focused spearhead lingered in military discourse for generations. Still, Eisenhower's call embodied his duty to the full theater, beyond one army's triumphs. Come December 1944, Eisenhower's command acumen faced its sternest trial as Germany unleashed its last big push. Hitler had covertly mustered troops for a colossal thrust via the Ardennes woods, staking all on a frantic bid to cleave Allied ranks and reclaim the crucial harbor of Antwerp. On December 16th, 3 German armies hammered U.S. positions manned by overextended defenders. Dubbed the Battle of the Bulge, this onslaught forged a peril that demanded Eisenhower's peak as theater chief. Almost instantly, Eisenhower rallied the coalition counter. He saw at once that the German surge, though menacing, offered a chance if managed shrewdly. German troops were pushing forward past their logistical support, leaving them vulnerable to enemy retaliation. Eisenhower hurriedly dispatched additional troops to vulnerable areas, yielded territory when needed to safeguard his units, and synchronized U.S., British, and French divisions to halt the incursion. Above all, he assigned Patton a mission that appeared unfeasible. The 101st Airborne Division found itself encircled at Bastogne, a vital junction city. Should Bastogne be lost, German troops might advance west toward Antwerp. Eisenhower required Patton to withdraw from his ongoing efforts, redirect the Third Army 90 degrees northward, and strike the southern flank of the German salient to rescue Bastogne. On December 19th, Eisenhower convened with Patton and Bradley at Verdun to plan the countermeasure. When Eisenhower inquired about the earliest attack date, Patton stated he could launch on December 22nd. Doubting that a full army could reposition so swiftly, Eisenhower dismissed the timeline as absurd. Yet Patton spoke truthfully. He had foreseen such a scenario. His intelligence chief, Colonel Oscar Koch, had forecasted the German assault via meticulous review of foe activities. Patton had previously instructed his team to devise backup strategies. Back at his base in Nancy, he merely contacted his deputy and uttered the prearranged signal for the prepped initiative. The Third Army pulled off one of the swiftest and most intricate redeployments in warfare annals. Patton launched his offensive on December 22nd, propelling 3 divisions northward amid snowstorms and icy terrain en route to Bastogne. In spite of harsh conditions, fierce opposition, and logistical hurdles, the Third Army pressed on. On December 26th, units from the 4th Armored Division pierced the lines to reach Bastogne, connecting with the besieged airborne soldiers. More support arrived soon after. By late January, Allied troops had driven the Germans back to their initial positions. The Bulge was crushed. Germany's final desperate bid collapsed. The Battle of the Bulge highlighted the seamless blend of Eisenhower's overarching strategy and Patton's bold field command. Eisenhower orchestrated the full Allied reaction, distributed assets, and decided on defensive holds versus strikes. Patton delivered daring on-the-ground direction, pulling off feats deemed unattainable. Their partnership proved invincible, with each supplying key components to triumph. By March 1945, Allied armies were fording the Rhine and surging into the Reich. On March 1st, the Third Army seized Trier, sparking a notable reply. After Eisenhower's command post wired advice to skirt Trier since taking it would demand 4 divisions, Patton responded, "Have taken Trier with 2 divisions. Do you want me to give it back?" The retort captured Patton's bold assurance and his drive to seize goals others viewed as overly ambitious. From March to May, the Third Army dashed through Germany. They freed the Ohrdruf concentration camp, the initial such site, freed by U.S. troops. Patton compelled nearby German residents to inspect the camp and confront Nazi horrors. His command took huge hauls of captives, connected with Red Army pushes from the east, and delved far into Czechoslovakia until command stopped them. As Germany capitulated on May 8, 1945, the Third Army boasted a remarkable fighting ledger. Between August 1, 1944 and May 8, 1945, Patton's troops had freed or seized about 81,500 square miles across France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. They had nabbed around 1.28 million captives and dealt roughly 500,000 losses to German units. The Third Army's losses, though heavy, were relatively lighter than those of other Allied forces, confirming Patton's belief that forceful advances preserved troops by dismantling adversaries before they could mount strong defenses. Still, Eisenhower's command enabled every bit of it. His administrative expertise orchestrated and carried out the landing. His negotiation prowess kept the contentious alliance intact amid numerous upheavals. His broad outlook steered campaigns from Normandy to the Elbe River. His knack for handling tough egos, from Montgomery's haughtiness to de Gaulle's touchy patriotism to Patton's rashness, averted rifts that could have undermined the pact. His readiness to tackle tough calls, from greenlighting perilous missions to selecting assault windows to sinking replies to sudden threats, marked him as the perfect top leader. The puzzle of why America's premier field commander sat out D-Day command resolved itself in the campaign's essence. Overlord demanded not a frontline genius, but an organizer, a mediator, a big-picture planner adept at overseeing history's most elaborate military endeavor. Patton was indeed America's top battlefield strategist, possibly the war's most outstanding. Yet Overlord demanded a distinct set of attributes. It called for a leader capable of coordinating multinational forces, harmonizing rival national agendas, planning operations across vast regions, and fostering confidence among various governments and branches of the armed forces. Eisenhower excelled in these areas. Patton fell short. The slapping episodes, rather than mere regrettable lapses, exposed deep-seated personality defects that rendered Patton unfit for the top role. His struggles with anger management, propensity for rash choices, and absence of diplomatic sensitivity. Such characteristics could suit a corps or army leader, yet they proved unacceptable for an overarching commander dealing with intricate international relations and sustaining high-level political backing. Roosevelt's decision to select Eisenhower instead of Marshall showcased profound foresight. Marshall would have made a superb supreme commander. No one rivaled his administrative prowess. His grasp of grand strategy ran deep. His standing remained beyond reproach. However, Marshall's real strength resided in the capital, where he oversaw the worldwide conflict, handled dealings with Congress, juggled demands from diverse fronts, and ensured the political and supply line foundations that enabled triumphs. Shifting Marshall overseas to Europe might have fixed one issue but sparked a bigger one. Placing Eisenhower in Europe alongside Marshall in Washington emerged as the perfect pairing. Patton, though excluded from overall command and even the D-Day assault, discovered his perfect fit. His brilliance in tactics and bold drive aligned precisely with the demands of fluid combat after the landings took hold. The Third Army's achievements confirmed all the hype surrounding Patton's talents. He truly ranked as the U.S. military's premier fighting general, the one whose reputation instilled fear in German ranks. Still, he operated beneath Eisenhower, carrying out a broader framework crafted by Eisenhower and Marshall together, fulfilling his segment within an overarching scheme that relied on varied expertise across tiers. This leadership call left a lasting imprint well past the end of World War II. Eisenhower's achievements set fresh benchmarks for today's armed forces command. He showed that today's conflicts demand more than just battlefield acumen. They require top-tier management, keen political insight, skillful negotiation, and long-range planning. These elements evolved into benchmarks for top brass in the years that followed. The U.S. Armed Services focus on integrated missions, allied operations, and big-picture strategy, rather than just frontline skills, stems straight from insights drawn from Eisenhower's triumphs. Eisenhower parlayed his service record into a political career, holding the U.S. presidency from 1953 until 1961. His time in the White House mirrored the traits that defined his wartime command: administrative mastery, forward-looking analysis, alliance forging, and steering through tangled issues while keeping the main goals in view. He brought the Korean War to a close, handled Cold War strains without resorting to atomic conflict, and laid out approaches that steered U.S. policy for generations. His leadership as president illustrated how abilities suited to top military authority transfer seamlessly to highest civilian governance. Patton lacked any such chance. Following Germany's capitulation in May 1945, he took on the role of military governor in Bavaria. Soon after, he stirred fresh uproar. His hesitation to push hard on denazification, his remarks implying ex-Nazi officials might fill government posts, along with ideas that the Western powers ought to challenge the Soviets right away, drew sharp rebukes from officials in Washington and the media. Eisenhower, attuned to these political winds, relieved Patton of Third Army leadership in October 1945. On December 8, 1945, Patton sustained grave injuries in a vehicle crash close to Mannheim, Germany. The staff automobile smashed into a U.S. Army truck, resulting in a fractured neck that paralyzed him below the injury. He received care at Heidelberg Hospital, but physicians proved powerless against his wounds. 12 days afterward, on December 21, 1945, Patton passed away due to pulmonary edema and heart failure. At age 60, he found his final resting place in the American Military Cemetery in Luxembourg, alongside the troops he once led. A plain white cross, matching those of his subordinates, denotes his site. Marshall persisted in vital public duties post-war, taking on positions of immense weight. In 1945, President Truman named him Special Representative to China, aiming to broker peace between the nationalists and communists. Though the effort collapsed, Marshall acquired key understandings of regional dynamics that influenced U.S. approaches. By 1947, Truman elevated Marshall to Secretary of State. There, he unveiled the European Recovery Program during an address at Harvard University on June 5, 1947. The program, the initiative soon dubbed the Marshall Plan, delivered substantial U.S. support to revive the war-ravaged economies of Western Europe. In just 4 years, America supplied more than $12 billion in aid, aiding 16 European countries in overcoming the devastation wrought by conflict. This program averted financial ruin, fostered economic growth that diminished the allure of communism, and solidified U.S. influence in the post-war era. It proved just as vital to securing lasting peace as the Normandy invasion had been to achieving military triumph. Marshall briefly held the role of Secretary of Defense amid the Korean conflict before stepping down in 1951. Then, in 1953, he earned the Nobel Peace Prize for his visionary aid effort, the sole career military officer to ever claim that distinction. He passed away on October 16, 1959, at the age of 78, at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, and received a full military burial at Arlington National Cemetery. President Truman joined the funeral service and afterward declared Marshall the finest American alive. The bond among these three remarkable figures, Eisenhower, Marshall, and Patton, shaped the Allies' success in World War II. Their individual strengths intertwined seamlessly to complement one another. From his position in Washington, Marshall supplied the overarching strategy and worldwide orchestration. In Europe, Eisenhower handled the logistical implementation and alliance oversight. At the ground level, Patton delivered superior battlefield prowess and aggressive momentum for his forces. Victory eluded any one of them in isolation. By assigning each to roles that maximized their distinctive gifts, they created an invincible team. Roosevelt's insight in pinpointing the ideal assignments for each was a game-changer. Opting to keep the nation's top battlefield leader away from commanding the D-Day assault was a sound choice across all criteria. The operation thrived on impeccable coordination rather than brilliant maneuvers. Launching the assault meant synchronizing countless elements involving various branches and countries. It demanded finesse in navigating alliance frictions. It called for foresight to weave the landings into the larger campaign. It needed restraint to delay until conditions aligned well and resolve to advance even when they fell short. These were Eisenhower's core assets. Patton's prowess shone in subsequent phases, once the front lines broke open for fluid combat where bold strategies swung the tide. Deploying Patton for feints prior to D-Day and as a frontline leader soon after showed masterful grasp of leveraging each commander's skills optimally. The equation for Allied success hinged less on identifying the fiercest warrior and more on the ablest organizer. It prioritized not just battle winners, but stewards of intricate multiplayer warfare. It valued not the instiller of terror in foes, but the builder of confidence among uneasy partners. On that score, Eisenhower stood alone as the supreme command pick. Patton remained crucial for frontline innovation. Marshall stayed essential for high-level orchestration. Yet for the precise demands of orchestrating and carrying out D-Day, then steering the push from Normandy to Berlin, Eisenhower brought the exact blend of talents required. By selecting Eisenhower ahead of Marshall and Patton, Roosevelt displayed the sharp judgment that marked his oversight of the war. He grasped that in military setups, like any intricate group endeavor, varying expertise suits different tiers. Traits excelling at platoon command diverge from those vital at brigade scale. What shines at corps command differs from army-wide needs, and supreme leadership calls for yet another set. Roosevelt saw that Operation Overlord demanded top-tier administrative and relational expertise over peak combat flair. He picked wisely. The outcome, freeing Western Europe and toppling Nazi Germany. On June 6, 1944, as Allied troops hit the shores of Normandy, they operated within a hierarchy that aligned skills to demands flawlessly. Eisenhower's mastery of logistics had mapped out every aspect. His relational acumen had preserved alliance cohesion. His broader outlook had pinpointed the optimal path. Marshall's backing from Washington ensured supplies and political cover. Patton, posing as a decoy in England, immobilized German forces merely through his fame. 2 months on, when Patton hit the field at last, his combat sharpness capitalized on the openings from Eisenhower's groundwork. History's grandest campaign triumphed because Roosevelt nailed the leadership call. the U.S.'s premier fighter, stayed off the D-Day roster not due to weakness, but because the mission needed a distinct form of mastery. In elevating Eisenhower above Patton for overall command, Roosevelt affirmed that prevailing in contemporary conflicts means pairing fitting abilities to targeted obstacles. Patton gained his fame during the advance through France, the relief of Bastogne, and the push into Germany. Yet D-Day was Eisenhower's domain, thanks to his unparalleled skill in coordination, diplomatic finesse, and forward-thinking strategy that made possible the most monumental military triumph of the 20th century. Choosing to bench Patton wasn't a dismissal, but an acknowledgement that top-level leadership demanded distinct strengths, ones that Eisenhower held in abundance. By deploying each leader in a position where their singular gifts could shine brightest, they both played a pivotal role in securing the Allies' success. History validated Roosevelt's judgment through its outcomes: the freeing of Europe, the downfall of Nazi oppression, and the forging of a lasting democratic order that has held for over 8 decades. This enduring impact serves as proof of a key truth in leadership: that true excellence demands more than bravery and battlefield prowess. It calls for the insight to assign the ideal individual to the perfect position precisely when needed. Roosevelt embodied that insight. By keeping Patton out of the D-Day command and entrusting overall authority to Eisenhower, he altered the course of warfare and influenced the world we know today.